Welcome to Learning to Glow, a show about wellness, skin health, and self-development. I'm your host, Jess. I'm a mom, entrepreneur, and skincare expert. I'm so excited to share tips on how to achieve healthy skin and bring amazing guests in the field of health, fitness, aging gracefully, and personal growth. Let's explore all different ways we can take care of ourselves as women, both inside and out, to truly shine. So let's get glowing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Learning to Glow podcast. I'm your host, Jess, and welcome. We have a terrific episode for you today with Haley Fountain. Haley is a women's health coach, yoga instructor, model, and actress. She combines modern nutrition, ancient wisdom, and behavioral science to help women look and feel their best. Haley is a certified Integrative Nutrition Health Coach with an advanced accreditation in Hormonal Health, and also a 200-hour certified yoga and meditation instructor. She resides in Houston, Texas, where she coaches women privately and also offers events, experiences, retreats for women wanting to improve their health and connect more deeply with themselves. I absolutely love this conversation with Haley. She is amazing at breaking down these really important topics. And it started around nutrition, but so much more. We talked about how to achieve hormonal balance, the role nutrition plays with our hormones, digestion and how to improve it, eating enough fiber, and actually examples of what and how to do it. And I feel like people just don't talk about this topic very much. So this was one of my favorite parts. We talked about what a balanced plate looks like and thyroid health. We also actually talked about cycle syncing, what that is and how to start using it. That was amazing. So definitely you're going to love this one. You can see we touched on so many different important topics. She is a wealth of knowledge. I really loved how she taught us so much in this single episode and gave such great examples and practical guidance to actually be able to incorporate these things into our daily life. Make sure you go and follow her. I will make sure everything is linked in the show notes. Check out her website, Holistic in Houston. You just go ahead and go over to the show notes and the direct links will all be there. She is fantastic. On another note, before we begin with Haley, I've had a lot of my clients reach out to me this past month complaining of dry skin and flakiness. I addressed this in one of my latest blog posts. I mentioned there are a few different things you can do for your skin. It is super dry out. It's that time of year where we need to maybe switch up our winter routine and maybe even add in ingredients that are going to help bind moisture like hyaluronic acid. If you are not already subscribed to my newsletter, you can go to my website, simplyjessskincare.com, get on the list where I share my top tips for healthy skin. I talk about wellness and other offers or sales in my line. If you're new to Simply Jess, you can receive 20% off your entire purchase just by entering podcast at checkout. And if you have any questions about what's right for you or just your skin in general that you are a little bit confused about, you can send us an email. That is also located in the show notes. So thank you so much. And now on to our amazing episode with Haley. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Learning to Glow podcast. I'm your host, Jess, and today we have Haley Fountain. Welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Jess. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Me too. We were just talking right before we pushed record about how we are on the same page when it comes to so many of these things. And what you teach and what you do with your clients is such a passion of mine. I love learning about. So you are a holistic health coach.
Mm-hmm.
You also are a yoga and meditation teacher, and you do so much more. But if you could just, first of all, welcome. And if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'll give you the short version. So I live in Houston, Texas. I started as sort of a wellness blogger, influencer, if you will, and then realized I wanted to go a little deeper and be able to help people on a deeper level. So during COVID, I had a lot of free time. I went back to school, got my Integrative Nutrition Health Coaching certification, and started coaching people on how to make, healthy choices for their body. And in that became very passionate about hormones and the menstrual cycle and women's bodies. I feel we're very underserved in the wellness and health world. So I went back to school, got my advanced accreditation in hormonal health as well. And then shortly after that became really curious about the physical body, about nervous system regulation. So I got my yoga and meditation 200-hour certification as well. And yeah, now I'm here. I teach yoga in Houston, and I do a lot of wellness events, and I do private coaching with women who are trying to improve their health with like a focus on hormonal health and gut health, because I believe that's sort of uh, that is the start of all of it. That's where everything starts and ends, is with our hormones and with our gut. So that's
Yeah.
short version.
I love it. It's such important topics. I love it. What made you want to come into this wellness space? Were you just always interested in it, or was there like something that was happening with you that you wanted to sort out?
Yeah, I think like everyone else, I had really bad issues in some of these areas when I was younger, and that modern medicine just wasn't really, it was giving me a Band-Aid, but it wasn't giving me a solution. So, I remember being 17 years old and having really painful periods. And at the time, my parents did what most people's parents do. They took me to the doctor. The doctor recommended I go on the birth control pill, which does help menstrual cramps. But as I learned more about my body, learned more about birth control, I realized that it was really just a Band-Aid, and it wasn't actually getting to the root cause of the problem of why I was having these cramps and really painful, heavy periods. And so that, started in the menstrual health area, was where I became very curious. And then I remember being probably 15 or 16 years old, and I had gut issues for as long as I can remember. And I was put on, again, my parents took me to the doctor, and I was put on antacids. I was put on Prilosec, I think, and Prevacid, I think, were the two. And if you look at the side effects of those medications, they cause osteoporosis. Like, it's pretty gnarly. You really can't take those for more than a few weeks at a time. So again, I was kind of left with like, okay, I'm fixing the symptom, but like, why am I having these problems to begin with? And so there was that. And then I think, I started modeling at age 17, 18. I went to LA for a little bit, and became interested in, if I'm honest, in weight loss, because being in the modeling industry, it's about, they're all about, or at the time they were all about being really thin. But then it sort of evolved from there into like, how can I manage my weight in a healthy, sustainable way? So it all sort of snowballed from different directions, but ended up in the same place. And then I think I've always been a slightly anxious person, and became really curious about, okay, how can I regulate my nervous system and have energy without having to drink 4 cups of coffee a day. So it's all just really stemmed from my own experiences. And then, when I started blogging in 2018 and sharing what I was learning, I found that there's a lot of other people that had these problems, and there's nothing wrong with taking medicine, but I think there's a lot of people that want to find a root cause solution to their issues, not just a pill they can take that's going to put a band-aid and potentially cause other symptoms.
Oh, it's so true. I know. I've had some of the same issues that you mentioned here, and it's really tough trying to figure out because you go to the doctor and then there's like one path unless you start to learn about this other way of life. And I feel like more people are aware of things that we can do nowadays, and we're more open. Sometimes it takes a little bit more work up front, but it's worth it. It's such a good place to start too if you can. So one thing that I really want to talk to you about today, because I know hormones are such a big part of what you do, just talking about hormones in relation to nutrition and things that you can do to help balance hormones, because I know this is such a big topic for so many of my listeners, and our hormones are off, we're out of balance, and it's like, where do we start and how does nutrition play a role in that? Because I don't know that a lot of people would put two and two together. Like, how could nutrition actually help with my hormones? But it does.
Yeah. So it's important, like, what is a hormone? Hormones are the chemical messengers that tell every cell in our body what to do, when to do it, how to do it, where to do it. And our hormones are created by different organs in the body. And what creates our organs? What creates every cell in our body? The food that we eat, right? it, everything that you eat is going to literally create every cell in your body and fuel every cell in your body, which is going to dictate how everything in your body functions at a very basic level. So it makes perfect sense then that by eating nutritious food that has a lot of nutrients in it. So when I say nutritious, I mean nutrient dense food, that it's going to have a better impact on the cells in your body than eating what I would call like nutrientless food that doesn't have a lot of nutrients. So, in terms of what you can do, there's so many things, but we know a lot of these things we know, right? Eat more vegetables, drink more water, drink filtered water specifically, because a lot of the tap water supplies in cities have a lot of chemicals in them to clean the water and make it so that you don't die of, E. coli or like another crazy bacteria, but they usually are also they add chlorine and things to clean the water, but that's an endocrine disruptor. So drinking like a lot of good quality filtered water, minimizing your caffeine intake and your alcohol intake, and then from a food perspective, getting enough protein really really important to repair and build all the cells in your body. Getting a lot of healthy fats, those are really essential for hormones. And then another thing that I feel like people don't talk about enough is fiber. We need, really increasing your fiber. The recommended dietary intake for women right now is 25 grams of fiber and 35-ish for men, I believe. I don't think that's enough. I think you
Mm.
should be aiming for 35 to 40 minimum, but even more than that. Like I try to get 40 grams plus a day. Now, disclaimer, if you don't ever eat fiber and then you go to 40 grams overnight, you will be very constipated. So if you don't eat a lot of fiber, start to gradually increase over the course of like a few weeks. Otherwise, you'll be very uncomfortable. But the fiber is really important for hormones specifically because especially when it comes to menstrual health, estrogen is detoxed throughout the body, from the body through phase 2 liver detoxification. We need fiber in order to move things through the liver, through our bowels, and to be released from the body. And if you're not eating enough fiber, you're most likely not having regular bowel movements. We should be having 1 to 2 bowel movements per day. If you're not, then all of those hormones, particularly estrogen, which is one of the main estrogen dominance is one of the main issues where a lot of women have, you know, hormonal imbalances and really uncomfortable symptoms. That's just recirculating back into your bloodstream if you're not eating fiber and having bowel movements. So that's really important. Another really helpful thing you can add is cruciferous vegetables. So I know you probably know what those are, Jess, but for anyone listening, the cruciferous family of vegetables is your broccoli, your cabbage, your kale, cauliflower, bok choy, arugula. I may be forgetting a couple, but you can Google cruciferous. And cruciferous vegetables have a compound in them called indole 3 carbinol. And that is another thing that helps with phase 2 liver detoxification and helps to detox excess estrogen and other xenoestrogens, which are estrogen mimicking substances that come from different environmental toxins. So, anyways, I'm kind of geeking out here, but at a high
I
level,
love
I
it.
would say, yeah, I like to get very specific. But increasing fiber, eating more cruciferous vegetables. I like to have 1 to 2 servings a day. I love cabbage. I'm like all my friends know, like cabbage all day for me. And then drinking a lot of water and getting enough protein and healthy fats.
So, just for anyone listening who is like, "Oh man, what one thing that really stuck out to me and what you just said is the fiber."
Mhm.
And we're not I don't know anyone who's like, "I got to get my fiber." Like I don't feel like you're right. We don't talk about it. We don't hear about it as much. So, shooting for like 40 grams a day in fiber, what are some examples of great ways to get fiber in?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, because a lot of times people, and this is, marketing companies and just like modern things. When we hear fiber, you're like, oh, let me go take Metamucil. Please don't take that. I mean, that's like a last resort, but let's get it from our food. So you can Google a list of highest fiber foods, but I'll give you a few examples. Pomegranate seeds are an
Ooh.
excellent source of fiber and antioxidants and protein. I love to have in the morning. I'll like scramble some eggs and then have some coconut yogurt with pomegranate seeds. So good. It's like nice and sweet and crunchy. So pomegranate seeds are excellent and they're in season right now, depending on where you live. They're always on sale at the grocery store at this time of year. Artichokes are actually quite high in fiber as well. And I love artichokes. You can put them on pizza. If you go to Italian restaurants that are, focusing on seasonal vegetables, a lot of them are serving artichokes. And I think they're really delicious. It might maybe an acquired taste if it's not something you're used to. If you go to Italy, they serve artichokes everywhere, but that's another one. Avocados are actually quite high in fiber as well. So adding avocado, guacamole is one of my favorite dishes. You can also like freeze, cut them up and freeze them and put them in your smoothies and or just, eat them on a sandwich. There's so many things. Avocado toast, at brunch, whatever it is. So those are three. Beans and legumes and lentils are also really great sources of protein and fiber. If you if you or anyone listening follows the Blue Zones diet, they highly recommend beans and legumes. So, I encourage getting like one serving of beans and legumes in your diet every day, or lentils. And lentils are, if you like Indian food, if you go to an Indian restaurant, they're almost always going to have a lentil dish. That's a nice, like, vegetarian, vegan option every now and then. Those are probably my top ones. And then cabbage has a lot of fiber too. I'm like trying to make cabbage cool again. I love like the purple red cabbage and green cabbage, but the purple red is my favorite because you get the polyphenols because of the deep purple color of it. And I love to slice it up and then sort of pan fry it a little bit so it gets a little bit crispy. It's delicious.
Oh my gosh, I'm writing that down. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
making that
seriously
dish.
so good. So avocado, like, get a fry pan, add some avocado oil, and then throw some cabbage like at high heat. Throw some cabbage on there and just saute it for like 4 or 5 minutes just so it gets a little crispy. Add some salt and pepper. It is so good.
That sounds so good. I love these foods that you're mentioning. It's funny because pomegranate seeds, I have them pretty much every morning. I actually, because they can go bad. Like I
Yeah.
buy them already, like in the little jar seeded, and so I just throw them in the freezer. And by the time, and I top my yogurt or my cottage cheese with pomegranate seeds. And then by the time I go to eat them, like it's fine. I feel like they defrost so
Yeah.
easy.
That's a good
So
idea.
yeah, I love just doing that so that it lasts longer. And I love artichokes. And there's so many different ways you can buy them. Like you can buy them fresh, but they're in the cans now. And
Mhm.
I've even seen them like jarred. So there's like so many different options
Yeah.
for artichokes. I loved that Blue Zone documentary I watched.
So good.
I've talked about it on here many times because I was just so excited about it. And I just make salads with all of this stuff in it now. Ever
Yeah.
since watching that, it's like it's kind of like a Mediterranean salad, and I'll throw in the chickpeas and the lentils and all the artichokes and the sun-dried tomatoes, and so I think I'm getting my fiber. It sounds like
Yeah, it
because
sounds like it.
I love, if you haven't seen the Blue Zones documentary, I cannot recommend it enough. So I do have a question about the cruciferous vegetables for you, because I've heard that you should cook them before you eat them and not to eat raw, and because it can upset your stomach. Do you agree with that, or is that it doesn't matter?
It depends on the person and it
Okay.
depends on the vegetable. And, that's where I think the concept of bio-individuality comes in. And we are all, although there are certainly common trends, we are all bio-individual, meaning that we all have different needs. Our bodies are different, our digestive systems are different. Some people can handle raw vegetables like that better than others. I can tell you, as much as I love cruciferous vegetables, Brussels sprouts just do not agree with me, cooked or not cooked. For whatever reason, I can eat every other cruciferous vegetable all day, but Brussels sprouts just don't feel good. So there's a little bit of experimentation required. The general recommendation is to lightly steam them or lightly roast them or lightly saute them so that you're cooking them down a little bit, making them a little more digestible, but you are not completely cooking out all the nutrients, because the more you cook it, obviously, the more nutrients that sort of get cooked off as well. So there's sort of a middle ground. So I would tell everyone, just experiment with it. Like, and then there's going to be certain ones that agree with you and certain that don't, because they are high fiber. And it also depends, I think, where you're at in your diet and your health journey. If you haven't even looked at a vegetable in 6 months, then eating raw cabbage, whatever, is probably not going to feel good, versus if you're someone who eats a lot of vegetables, it might be, fine. And then there's also so much that goes into food in terms of food pairing. So eating the raw vegetables by themselves versus having it as part of a balanced meal can make a difference as well. So there's a little bit of experimentation required. If you're someone that has a sensitive stomach, I would recommend with starting by lightly steaming or lightly sauteing or roasting, just to, be careful, and then you can experiment from there.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay, good to know. So, I want to talk about what you just said actually. When you are making a plate, you just said having it together with a balanced plate. Can you talk a little bit about that? I've spoken to a nutritionist in the past, and one of the things that she said that really stuck out to me is kind of when and I've heard you hear so many different things. Like for this lady, she was like, you should have on your plate all of the macros. You should have your protein and your fat and your carbs, and you can eat them at the same time, or you should balance your plate like that. And, but then you hear other people say, oh, you should only eat certain things at certain times, or eat fruit by itself with nothing else. And, that can get a little confusing for people. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, oh my gosh, your questions are so great. I love this question.
Thank you.
So I am a big believer, both in my own life and with my clients, in blood sugar balance. That
Mm.
is key because that is going to impact your energy levels. It's going to impact your weight, so many things. We do not want to ride that blood sugar roller coaster. We want to keep our blood sugar balance for stable energy, satiety, all those things. So I like to have a balanced plate. And when I say balanced plate, I mean, like you just said, a good division of protein, fat, fiber, and carbohydrates. I don't encourage eating carbohydrates by themselves ever. You want to there's a lady called the Glucose Goddess. I'll give her a shout out. She's on Instagram. She has a book. She's out of France and she's amazing. And done a lot of research on this. I personally have too. I used to wear a glucose monitor and try different foods and see how my body reacted to them. And so I can tell you from my own experience and having my clients do this as well, this is legitimate. You want to have you never want to eat carbohydrates alone unless you're like a marathon runner or something and like need crazy energy. But the average person, you always want to have a good balance of protein, fiber, fats, carbohydrates, and it's going to vary person to person. I tell my clients if it's a normal day and you're just walking around doing your thing, try to get at least 20 grams of protein. If you're active, if you exercise, if you're trying to build muscle, I'd go for like 30 grams plus per meal of protein. The fat, the fiber, the carbohydrates doesn't really, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but like if you're getting enough protein, you're just not going to be that hungry. That's bottom line. So if you don't take anything else from this, like if you struggle with always feeling hungry or like low energy, you probably could eat more protein and it will definitely help. So that's it. And then I always tell my clients in terms of how you plate your food, it's really important. Like what I'm sharing just now is all the technical stuff of like what to eat, this and that. But like there is a visual element to your food as well. Like put it on a real plate. Don't just eat it out of a Tupperware container. I know it's more dishes, but like make your food pretty, make it pleasing. Like part of the digestion process is actually looking at your food. Your salivary glands start to release enzymes that are going to help break down your food as you're preparing your food and smelling it, as you're looking at it. So putting your food on a plate and making it somewhat aesthetically pleasing can be really helpful in making it an overall better experience in terms of digestion. The digestion starts before the food even hits your mouth. Another thing too, another underrated thing is the energy that you have around your meal. Are you like hunched over your desk and like, again, eating out of a Tupperware, just eating super fast? How fast are you eating? How many times are you chewing? All those things. A lot of us have been conditioned to eat really fast. We're not chewing our food enough, and it's causing bloating and digestive discomfort because, again, a lot of your digestion starts in your mouth as you chew, and the saliva breaking down the enzymes, breaking down the food, and your teeth manually breaking down the food as well. So slowing down. I love to have some sort of gratitude or intention practice before I eat, whether if you're religious, you can say a prayer. If you just, express gratitude to the universe, whatever it is, something, or just sit down and just, think about what you're grateful for, whatever it is, whatever resonates with you, but like something to just slow down and be intentional with mealtime and have a little bit of gratitude as you are about to nourish your body. I think those things make a big impact and they're really underrated. I don't have any studies that prove this, but I'm sure there's some out there. So those are things. And then lastly, another technical thing is just I always recommend eating your protein, fats, and fiber first, having your carbohydrates last. Now, if you're having like a taco, you're going to have all those things together, obviously, but don't, for example, most of the time, if you can, maybe don't have bread. Like if you go to a restaurant and they serve bread, that's like the first thing we eat, but that'll actually spike your blood sugar.
Mm.
Have a little bit of, a fat or a protein first and then have the bread, or like dip the bread in olive oil to help offset that blood sugar spike. So I'll stop there, but those are a few things.
Those are awesome. I love those. Yeah, it's funny because I have had gut issues myself and digestion issues. And one thing that I really have been trying to do within this past year or two is to not inhale your food. And it is so hard, especially as a mom. You know, I have a lot of moms who listen. We go through a period where you're like shoveling food in your mouth and like taking it whenever you can. And I feel like I never stopped that. You know, it was almost like once I made that a habit, it just kind of continued to be a habit. And you think like just eating nutritious food is enough, but there are so many other things that go alongside it. Like you said, presentation and the way we're chewing. Are we chewing enough? Oh my gosh. Like I still have to remind myself that. And are we like super distracted while we're eating? Are we watching something stressful or like enjoying and relaxing? And I think it's our culture too.
Yes.
It's really hard to sit down and justify even like taking that time to have a meal or relax. Whereas in different cultures, like there's no to go cups. You sit down and drink your stuff and then you go. So it's such a good point for people, especially if they're having that digestion issue and, you know, making sure that your food is actually absorbing and breaking down. It's such a good point. When I first started my wellness journey, I had already been in the skincare industry for years, working on client skin and as an educator for multiple skincare brands. When I learned about how the toxins in our personal care and beauty products could have a negative impact on our health, I knew I needed to make a change. I was used to the result-driven products that I was working with, and I was not happy with the natural products on the market at that time. Although they were safer and cleaner, they did not meet my expectations for results. I created Simply Just Skincare to deliver the results my clients demanded from their products while using natural, toxin-free ingredients. You can check out my clients' results and reviews on my website, simplyjustskincare.com. In 30 days, my clients have reported more hydrated skin, less appearance of fine lines and wrinkles, and more of an overall glow. Our top sellers include our Repair Toner, our Hydrating Undo Serum with hyaluronic acid, and more. I am offering my listeners 20% off their first order with code PODCAST. Check it out in the link in my show notes to get glowing today.
I love that you said that, and a couple of things that brings to mind for me. One is that there's probably other moms, because I don't have children. I'm a dog mom, but I don't have children of my own yet. But I empathize a lot with, women who are or anyone really that's in that situation where you just have other things that are your priority. And there's probably, moms or busy people listening to this being like, okay, cool. Not only do I have to count my macros, but now I have to count how many times I chew. Like it can just feel really overwhelming, right? So just slowing down a little bit is the key. Slowing down, giving yourself the time that you deserve to eat and enjoy your meal. Something I found really interesting in my own life is that I started to notice I was having gut issues, and this is something I still struggle with, by the way. So everyone struggles with this. I was having like gut issues and but still eating pretty healthy. And then I would notice I'd go on vacation and not eat, as healthy as I do, and quote unquote healthy. I would eat more grains, more processed foods, but I wouldn't really have digestive issues. Like my digestion would be really good when I was on vacation, and I'd come home and get back to, my fruits and my vegetables and all the stuff. And I would start to have the issues again, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then it was actually my one acupuncturist I had at the time. He was like, "Well, yeah, when you're on vacation, you might not be eating foods that are, as healthy, but you're sitting down, you're having a meal with whoever you're traveling with, you're eating slow, and the food's being brought out to you like you're relaxed, you're enjoying yourself." And that's why. And isn't that crazy? But that's really the case. So a lot of people find that they're digesting better when they're on vacation, even though they're not necessarily eating as healthy as they do at home. But so if that's the case for you, it probably is the intention at the mealtime and just slowing down.
That is so crazy. I know, that's such a good point. I remember going to Italy and eating everything and then getting back and being like, I lost weight. I'm like, what is that
Same.
about? Granted, like I did walk probably 30,000 steps a day, but yeah, and then like I don't know, it's I think 3 hours I spent having dinners. Like it was
Yep.
very drawn out, so and very and lovely. And obviously we can't do that every day, but
Too
I
bad.
think what you said, too bad. Like too bad we can't be in Italy right now. I do feel like that even just saying what you said is so important because if you're already so stressed out and you already have so much on your plate, you don't have to count to 50 chews maybe, but maybe you can like take a breath before you sit down and just something that takes really no time at all, just so that you can be in the right headspace so that your digestion improves. Because this is a problem that so many people have. I love it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I saw on your website is you talked about thyroid health. And
Yeah.
in regard to nutrition, it's very prevalent nowadays that people are having issues with thyroid health. I have hypothyroidism.
Hmm.
So I'm always looking for ways to help with that and the health of my thyroid. But do you have any tips in regard to like nutrition in this topic?
Yeah, so there's a few, this area is still kind of emerging, but there are a few foods they have found that could be really beneficial to thyroid health. Strawberries are one of them.
Mm.
Brazil nuts are another one. And then sea vegetables like seaweed, nori, dulse, kelp, things like that. And seaweed is a really interesting, very nutrient dense food that not a lot of people know about. And what I love about it is number one, I love it's cheap. It is abundant. I mean, the oceans are like going on forever. We've got more ocean than we do land, right? So they're very abundant, very inexpensive. And if the taste of seaweed is not your thing, I would also, as I say this, I want to mention if you don't get seaweed salad. I mean, you can get seaweed salad if you want in like a sushi restaurant, but usually the seaweed salad they add like a green dye to it that makes it that lime green color. So it's, you're like taking one step forward and two steps back. So try to get real seafood. Most grocery stores carry it now. You can buy dulse flakes, which come in like a little container, and you sprinkle it on your food just like you would salt. I do a lot of, and it's a little bit salty. Obviously, seaweed is salty. I do a lot of Asian cooking, and so I'll just sprinkle the dulse flakes on my food when I'm done with the meal, and it's just a very delicate seaweed flavor, so it's not overpowering. But they also sell like seaweed snacks, like gently dried seaweed that you can snack on if that's your thing. But not everyone loves the taste of seaweed; it's kind of an acquired taste. So those are three things you can add to your diet that really help. Brazil nuts are one of the more popular and better researched things, and even I think it's just 3 Brazil nuts a day or something is what they recommend. So those are some things I would look at. And then another thing, another lifestyle thing that they have found the thyroid is very sensitive to EMFs, electromagnetic fields, and that is the things that come from our cell phones. So if you can take tech breaks, if you can turn off your Wi-Fi at night, put your phone on airplane mode to get a break from all those EMFs. I mean, I live in an apartment, and so unfortunately, doing that won't do much for me because I'm still getting all the signals. But if you think about it, like cell phones haven't been around that long, and they are such a part of our lives that I doubt there's anyone paying for studies to see in depth like what the health consequences are. But it makes sense that having all of these electromagnetic fields coming at us constantly would have an impact on us. And this is not, backed by science, but I personally think that might be why the thyroid issues have risen so quickly. I bet if you looked at like cell phone usage and compared it to thyroid issues, they would probably be very similar lines on a graph. That's just my speculation. So, anyways, those are probably I'd say the top things you can do for thyroid health on top of maintaining a healthy diet, exercise. Another thing with thyroid, because it can impact your weight, that blood sugar balance that I talked about earlier is going to be essential. Like if you have a thyroid issue and you're skipping breakfast, you're not having regular meals, you're not getting enough protein, you are literally setting yourself back so much. So really important to balance the blood sugar constantly when you have a thyroid issue.
Oh, good. I didn't know that. That's such good. That's awesome to know. I love the seaweed tip as well because I actually buy those for my kids, but then I was like, I should be eating this too because they love like taking it to the school lunches. So I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, good. Now I'm like, I'm starting to eat the seaweed too. I'm trying to remember. I need to buy the dulse flakes because that's so good on rice.
it's
I think
so good.
I love those. Yeah, I'm like, I love anything salty. I'm like such a fan of. So
Hmm.
one of the things that you said that I'm dying to ask you this one because I know personally a lot of people, and I am an ex non breakfast eater. I wanted to ask your opinion on that because I know people who, they wake up in the morning and then they have coffee and then they're like, I'm just not hungry until lunch or maybe like a few hours after I've had my coffee. is there a negative health consequence, especially when we're talking about women? Because I know it can be different for men, but what are your thoughts on skipping breakfast?
Yeah, so I personally am not a fan of skipping breakfast. I personally think everyone should be eating breakfast. Now, that being said, there are some people that just, they're not hungry and it's not impacting their blood sugar. But for most people, especially if you're not doing anything in the morning, if you're sleeping until 8 or 9 and don't have much going on, then you can maybe get away with waiting a little bit. But for most people, like, I exercise in the morning. I cannot skip breakfast. I'm starving by 9:30. And if I'm not, something is wrong. And intermittent fasting definitely has some benefits, but you can practice intermittent fasting and still eat breakfast. It depends on when you do your fasting window. I find men can do better with fasting long their fasting window can be longer than women. So there's different ways to intermittent fast. One of the most popular is that like 8 and 16 model where you only eat for an 8-hour window and you fast for 16 hours. So that, for example, could look like not eating until 12 o'clock and finishing eating by 8, and then you have a 16-hour fast. I find that men do really well with that. And
Mhm.
men's bodies are physiologically designed to handle that better. Women's bodies, we have more our bodies are more complex. Our hormones are more complex. We got a lot more going on. I'm also, I am a big fan of cycle syncing as well. So like maybe when you're ovulating, you could try the fasting, but when you're menstruating, your body's doing a lot. You need to eat more. Like usually like almost an additional meal's worth more, in my opinion. That's what I would recommend to my clients and what I do in my own life. That being said, we are all bio individual, but I do find that if you never eat breakfast, then your body is always going to adapt, and you may not necessarily be hungry at breakfast. But I would be curious for the people who are skipping breakfast if they wore a glucose monitor and looked at their blood sugar throughout the day, what that would show, because I bet it would show a dip. And when they drink coffee, they might get a dip in blood sugar, which would make them feel low energy. They drink the coffee and it's going to give them energy high. I personally am not a fan of drinking coffee or any caffeine on an empty stomach either.
Mhm.
I think you should have it with a meal or with a healthy fat. So that's a whole other topic. But I would be curious for those people, if their blood sugar is staying balanced, then maybe it works for them and that's fine. But for most people, it doesn't, and they end up overeating later in the day and they get on that blood glucose spike. So it really depends on the person. If someone listening to this is curious about that, you can get a glucose monitor. There's different, if you just literally Google CGM, continuous glucose monitor, you can find one. A lot of them have like a membership, like a 1 or 2 month membership that you can try it. They're not cheap, but you wear this monitor on your arm just like somebody that has diabetes might, and you can get real time data throughout the entire day, week of what your blood sugar is at. You can figure out what your fasting blood sugar is, so right when you wake up in the morning, and then how it is throughout the day. And if your blood sugar is staying stable, your energy is stable, everything's fine, then it's probably not the end of the world if you want to fast. But for most people and women in particular, I think they could benefit from eating breakfast.
Yeah, I was not a breakfast eater for so many years, and then when I gave it a try, I realized I was eating something before I had my caffeine, and then I was like, "Oh, I actually am hungry."
Yeah.
And now I wake up and I'm like, "I'm hungry." So
Yeah.
I it's such a new thing. It's just kind of my body is more, I don't know, it's changed in how I do things, and my it's like it reacted different. And I want to ask you one more question before I let you go, because I don't want to take too much of your time. But you mentioned cycle syncing.
Yes.
And I actually did a poll on my Instagram about cycle syncing, and a lot of people had never heard of it. So I would love if you could just tell us what it is, because I think there's a lot of people who would be really interested in knowing this information and could benefit from this information, but they just haven't heard of it or don't know what it is.
Yes, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I actually did a workshop about this back in November, and I'm going to be releasing like the workbook on my website soon. So, cycle syncing is basically using the different hormonal fluctuations of your cycle throughout the month to your advantage. I'm going to try to explain this in like the shortest way possible, but men's bodies, men and women are both cyclical. Our bodies are cyclical. Men's bodies are cyclical on a 24-hour period, or 24-hour cycle. So They have that circadian rhythm and their hormones kind of fluctuate throughout the day. Women have the circadian rhythm, the 24-hour cycle, but we also have a monthly 28-ish day cycle that kind of mimics the moon cycles. So the world that we live in, and not to get into the whole patriarchy thing, but the world, the modern workday, the modern week, the modern month is designed for a man's body because they're pretty much the same every day. We are not the same every day and every week. And a lot of women see this as a burden, but it's actually a superpower. And I will show you why. If you understand your body and understand what hormones are doing what and when, you can actually lean into it to become more productive. So you can manage your rest and your productivity around where you're at in your cycle. So if you're not tracking your cycle, if you're listening to this, highly recommend you start tracking your cycle, knowing where you're at. And basically, there's 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, and I like to describe them as the 4 seasons of the year. It's the easiest way to look at it. So I'm going to start with winter because I'm going to start with menstruation. Day 1 of your period is the first day that you bleed. And so this is our winter. So the first day that you bleed, the first day you start your period, this is your menstrual phase. This is winter. In wintertime, we hibernate, we rest, we introspect. So during this time of the month, a good time to just rest, lay low, plan your massages, your spa days, your things where you're kind of lounge around in your underwear and watch Netflix. That's the perfect time of the month to be doing that stuff. I try not to plan a lot of major social obligations or major work things or trips if I can help it. You can't always, but if you can, try to lay low during that time and keep your calendar light. Then the next season, you go into your follicular phase. So this is when you're done bleeding up until the time that you ovulate. So the follicular phase, this is the spring of the menstrual cycle. It's called follicular phase because of 2 hormones, follicle stimulating hormone, which is helping to release an egg. And then estrogen is going to start rising during this time. So you're going to notice you have more energy, your mood is a little better. Just like in springtime, this is when things are blooming. So it's a good time to start new projects, maybe get a little more social, kind of just get back out into the world, if you will. You can also amp up your workouts a little bit during this time. Then you go into your ovulatory phase. Ovulation is technically only a 1-day event because the egg only lives for 24 hours, but we kind of refer to the days before and after as the ovulatory phase. Now, when you're ovulating, your estrogen is going to be at the highest point in the month, and you're also going to have a little more testosterone than usual. We think of testosterone as the male hormone, but women have testosterone as well, just in different amounts. So your testosterone is going to be higher, your estrogen is going to be higher. Physically, you're going to be at your peak. You're going to be really high energy. Your skin's going to be plumper thanks to all that estrogen. Your breasts will be fuller, your lips will be fuller. And this makes sense biologically because whether or not you choose to have children, we are reproductive beings and your body wants you to reproduce. So it's trying to make you as attractive to the opposite sex as possible. So you'll notice your sex drive is a little higher because you've got more testosterone, you have more energy. I always try to plan like podcast episodes like this and things when I'm ovulating, and then like important work stuff or trips if I can around this time because I know I'm going to be feeling confident and flirty, whatever. So it's a good time for those types of things. Also, because of that extra testosterone boost, you're going to have a lot more energy and you'll find that you can hit your PRs and your workouts. So it's a good time for like really intense workouts, HIIT classes, things like that. Then lastly, we go into our luteal phase. So after you ovulate up until the time that you bleed is your luteal phase. And it's called the luteal phase because of luteinizing hormone, which is helping to build the uterine lining, and progesterone, which is known as like the kind of cool and calm hormone. Progesterone is going to make you feel hopefully a little more relaxed. And it's the precursor to GABA. So you'll find that you're more relaxed and hopefully sleeping better during this time, assuming that your hormones are fairly balanced. Luteal phase is sort of the fall or the autumn. This is a time to start to reap your harvest from the month. Focus on grounding, focus on tying up loose ends from anything that you were working on or doing. Everyone feels different during this phase. If you have, a little bit of imbalance in your hormones, you might experience heavier PMS symptoms during this time. But for most women, at least the beginning of the luteal phase, maybe not the last few days before your period, but the beginning can be a good time where you just feel kind of relaxed and you're sleeping really well. And then you start it all over again. So yeah, that's cycle syncing. And so kind of planning, obviously we cannot plan our entire lives around our menstrual cycle. Maybe one day I can call my boss and be like, I'm menstruating today. I can't come into work. But for now, even if you can plan 20 to 30% of your activities, if you have a say in when an important meeting is going to happen, and if you have a say in when an important social event is going to happen, or if you're trying to decide what your plans are going to be for the weekend, looking at where you're at in your cycle and planning your life a little bit, 20 to 30% based on where your hormones are going to be at during that time can have a really big impact on your quality of life.
I love that's such a good explanation. I love the seasons as an example. So, if you're not bleeding, if you're in menopause, what do you do to track if you're not actually having that day one start time?
Yeah, good question. So if you are perimenopausal, then it's going to be a little tricky because you might be having some periods, but maybe they're
Right.
not regular. So you would still track where you're at in your cycle. That cycle might just be a little longer for you. If you are postmenopausal, so you haven't had a period in over a year, then I would recommend using the moon cycles. It's a great way. Tune into the moon cycles and use the full moon as your ovulation and the new moon as the, menstrual, the bleed, and tune into it that way.
Ah, that's so good. Oh my gosh, Haley, we could talk all day.
I know.
Thank you so much for coming on. This was so amazing. And there's still questions I didn't get to ask you. So you're going to have to come back and chat
Yes.
with us again. But tell everybody how they can find you, where they can find you, how they can work with you, and all that good stuff.
Yes. So I'm most active on Instagram. My Instagram alias is holistic in Houston. So it's at holistic_in_Houston. So that's where I'm most active. I create a lot of content there. If you live here in Houston, I host a lot of like local wellness events, yoga, meditation, hormone workshops, things like that. I'm hosting my first retreat in the spring in the Hill Country in Texas, if anyone lives in the Texas area. So that'll be on my website. And my website is holisticinhouston.com. As you mentioned, I have a blog where I share a lot of free content about all the things that we just talked about and more.
That's so perfect. I will make sure to link everything in the show notes for everyone to go follow Haley. You are amazing. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you for everything you do in creating this platform.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and review so we can reach more people who want to learn to glow alongside us. See you next time.